On Monday, Trump posted that ICE agents apprehended and intend to deport a pro-Palestinian protester, Mahmoud Khalil, even though he has a green card. Trump said that Mahmoud is a radical foreign pro-Hamas agitator who is pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, and anti-American. Trump continued in his post by saying, "If anyone supports terrorism and is contrary to our national and foreign policy interests, then you are not welcome here, and that this arrest is just the first of many to come." Even though Secretary of State can revoke anyone's green card and deport them with just cause, critics want to know the exact nature of Mahmoud's crime in order to assess and possibly challenge the validity of it. Since Trump is governing over a divided nation, critics say that this case is important because if Mahmoud is unfairly and unlawfully labeled as a terrorist, then it shows that the Trump administration will unjustly use this label to silence anyone who speaks out against his agenda. The next day, Karoline Leavitt gave another press briefing where she highlights Trump's meetings for the week, as well as the jobs report showing that manufacturing is up, also the continuing resolution to prevent a government shutdown, and the successes of deportation. But the most contentious moment in her meeting was when an Associated Press reporter asked her, "Have you ever paid a tariff?" "Because I have. And they don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers." Karoline indignantly replied, "When we have fair and balanced trade, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I now regret giving my question to the Associated Press." On Wednesday, Trump met with the Ireland Prime Minister for their annual St. Patrick's Day celebration at the White House, where they mostly discussed tariffs and trade with both the EU and Ireland. Trump highlighted multiple times that the US had a deficit with Ireland, specifically citing the pharmaceutical companies that operate there. After Trump mentioned this a few times, Ireland's Prime Minister finally chimed in and said that it's a two-way street, because Ireland has roughly 700 companies operating inside the US that gives Americans jobs, and that Ireland buys more Boeing aircrafts than any other country outside the US. Trump was unable to say how many US companies were operating inside of Ireland, but during all of his ramblings, or weaving as he likes to call it, he was able to pepper in his favorite talking points, such as, "Russia would have never invaded if I were president," "We're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse," "Democrats are sick," "NBC is one of the worst networks," "Illegal immigrants are gang members, drug dealers, murderers, and are from prisons and mental institutions," and of course, we won the election by record numbers. The next day, two judges ordered that the Trump administration must reinstate thousands of workers that were cut by DOGE in the last few weeks. In one case, a judge from San Francisco ordered Trump to reinstate workers that were fired from 6 different agencies. And in the other case, a judge from Maryland ordered that temporary workers from 18 federal agencies must be immediately reinstated while issuing a 14-day stay. In both cases, the judges said these employees were fired unlawfully, and that if the Trump administration wants to downsize the federal government, they must do it within the law. Trump's press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, fired back and said, "Judges are attempting to unconstitutionally seize the power of hiring and firing from the executive branch. District courts cannot abuse the power of the entire judiciary to thwart the president's agenda. If a federal district court judge would like executive powers, they can try and run for president themselves." Critics believe that Trump's goal here is to get one of these cases to the Supreme Court, where the conservative court will rule in his favor and therefore expand the power of the executive branch. Then on Friday, the Senate passes the continuing resolution spending bill to fund the government until September after 10 Democrats decided to side with the Republicans to prevent a filibuster. The resolution was written entirely by the Republican Party and increases spending on defense and border enforcement, but also cuts roughly $13 billion used to fund federal departments and agencies such as Health and Human Services, Labor, and Education. Democrat Chuck Schumer led the charge to convince other Democrats to vote with Republicans because if the bill didn't pass, then the government would shut down, and Schumer believed that would be worse for Americans and make it easier for DOGE to dismantle federal agencies and services. Critics of both the Republican bill and Schumer's stance say that Democrats needed to stay united against the Republican dysfunction and chaos to force Republicans to work with Democrats. So Democrats who allow Republicans to write and pass bills that disregard input from half the country shows a failure of the Democrats' leadership. The next day, Trump invoked the Aliens Enemies Act of 1798 that would be used to allow the deportation of any migrant the government identifies as a gang member without going through the regular immigration proceedings and protections. This act has only been used 3 other times in history after its inception. Once during the War of 1812, again in World War I, and the last time was during World War II, when it was used to incarcerate Germans and Italians, as well as for the mass internment of Japanese American civilians. A federal judge immediately blocked the order for 14 days and set a hearing for Friday, March 21st. The judge noted that the law has never been used outside of a congressionally declared war, and that Trump may have exceeded his authority. Finally, on Sunday, we learned that Trump disobeyed the judge's block of the executive's use of the Aliens Enemies Act of 1798 that the judge ordered the previous day. In the judge's block, he verbally ordered 2 planes carrying 250 migrants heading to prisons in both Honduras and El Salvador to turn back to the US. But since the order was given verbally and did not include a written directive, the prisoners were delivered to the prison and most likely will remain there. Critics and human rights activists were appalled by these actions because we don't know who these 250 people are because they were not given due process. All we know is the Trump administration labeled them as gang members, then immediately deported them.